And welcome to Serpentes Sunday for March 19th, 2023. I'm Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Animal Sanctuary, and many of you might wonder how I manage so many snakes when I oftentimes let them out of their habitats to either free roam or experience time in exercise tents or other contained spaces that are safe for them to exercise in, roam in, sometimes eat in, sometimes do puzzle feeding or foraging exercises in. Well, I'm pretty good at mentally keeping track of who's where, but I do have precautions in place in case I get absent-minded and forget who is where, or forget that I even have a snake out. And just to be courteous to anyone else that might be here, like usually it's my husband or a working intern that we have. Sometimes my parents are here visiting. I put up signage and try to make it really clear when a snake is out, who they are, and where they are. Now this might be helpful to you even if you only have one snake. And that's just because if you let your one snake out to free roam, you might fall asleep, you might get distracted working on something else and just forget that they're out. You might take a snake out and put them in an exercise tent or another room or contained space that is safe for them to be in, but it's easy to forget that they're out because snakes are so quiet. Unless they're knocking things down and getting into things that they shouldn't, or they're getting into an encounter with another pet or person that you have in the house, you may never even know that your snake is there. They're very quiet. They're an unobtrusive pet, which is one of the things I like about them. They're just quiet. I like quiet pets. So it's going to be easy for you, even with your one snake, sometimes to just forget that you've got them out of their habitat. So I'm going to show you a few tips that I use around here just to keep things straight. Now, Sunspear's out on a designated activity station, and Sunspear is part of a behavioral study that I'm doing on agency and free choice, and she basically never gets locked up in her enclosure. So she's a known quantity. Over the last 4 years, I think it's been 4 years that she's been with me. You know, we've worked up to this, so I know that she's always out. That's just a known. My husband always knows that she's out. So she's a given quantity in this situation, but where we won't run into issues sometimes is if I have extra snakes out that aren't Sunspear and we forget about them. So this is Sunspear's enclosure. It's actually only a few feet, maybe 10 feet away from where she is. And she really doesn't go back into it. I do keep fresh water in here for her and all of her resources. She was in here yesterday briefly just to rest on that heat mat for a couple of hours, but then she ventured back out. And this is right behind my desk. And so the fact that it's right behind my workspace and the doors are open just serves as a reminder that Sunspear is not in her enclosure. She's out. Here's an open enclosure, and you see that there's no snake in it. Or maybe you're wondering, well, maybe the door's just open and there is a snake in it. There's not a snake in it because I have this handy little sign that I've made for the knob that says out in tent. So not only does it remind me that the snake that belongs in this enclosure is out of the enclosure, it tells me where that snake is. And you could write whatever you want on these cards. I might write out free roaming or out in tub or out in a specific room. But in this case, this snake is out in an exercise tent. So let's go check in with him. These are two of my exercise tents loaded with cardboard boxes and various items for the snakes. Now this one's empty, and that's because the door is open, and that's my clue that it's empty. It's available for use. This one is not empty. So this one, I have attached a little piece of an index card to the zipper with a bread tie or a twisty tie. So not only does that keep the zipper together while a snake's in here, it tells me who's in there. Kinsey is in there. He is my striped Morelia Bredli. I think I can probably open this up and let you see what he looks like. But so now not only is there a sign on his enclosure that says he's not in his enclosure, there's one on this tent that tells me he's in this tent, and it tells anyone else that walks by that Kinsey is in this tent. I just use these twisty ties because they're skinny and it's easy to put through the zipper, and they're easy to attach to a small hole in an index card. And so let's see if we can get a glimpse of Kinsey in the tent. It looks like he's chilled out on top of that packaging thing. I don't even know what that's called. It came with something I ordered. But of course, now that he sees me and sees the camera, he thinks, oh, maybe we're engaging in an activity and I need to move towards the camera. Nope, I'm just checking on you. Thank you. So if I were just putting him in here for the first time, I would zip this up and I would go ahead and put the twisty tie through the zippers. So not only does that hold the zippers closed, but then it gives me something to slide this card onto. And I only wrap it a couple of times because I want to be able to easily take it on and off. And now I know that he's in there. And now I know that the zipper's closed, and it's sort of a checks and balance system. Here's another example of something I do. This is a room with the door closed, and this is a room that is snake proofed. That means that a snake of moderate size, a carpet python, a Bredl's python, a royal python, adult, not babies, adults, could be free roaming and totally loose in this room with the door shut, and they can't get out, and there's nothing in there where they can get stuck or hurt. And so what I do to let people know that is I have this sign, and this one says, warning, carpet python out of enclosure exercising. And I just hang that on the door. Now, what if you have kids in the house? What if you have somebody that is in a wheelchair? What if you have a short person in your house and they're not necessarily going to be looking up here? Or what if you're just like my husband, who would literally just walk up to the door looking at the door knob and open the door without looking up? Well, you can also put this, usually what I do if I have one actually loose in here, is you can put this right on the door so that anyone that grabs the door can see, oh, what's this say? Oh, carpet python out of enclosure. Maybe I don't want to go in there. Or maybe you do. I don't know. But I can also adapt this if I have a different species by just adding a little handwritten note that says adult royal python in this case. And so what I will do is I will just stick that on the other side of the sign, and now over where it said carpet python, I have warning, adult royal python out of enclosure exercising. And I can put that somewhere on the door, wherever I think it's going to be most appropriate for whoever else is in the house, and also as a reminder to me that that snake is loose in there. When there's not a snake loose, I turn the sign around and I leave it on the door so that it's just blank and it's there when I need it, but there's no confusion that there's a snake in there or not. Now let's take a look at something else I do. If you notice, this sign on this tub says ready for use. So what does that mean exactly? Well, let me get that down and I'll show you. So I keep some containers ready to go in case I have to grab a snake and evacuate, take them to the vet, go pick one up, or if I'm using tubs as enrichment spaces or temporary holding, I will label a clean tub that's all ready to have a snake put into it, ready for use. And usually what I have in here is paper towel or something else on the bottom, a cardboard box. Sometimes I'll have a plastic hide of some sort. It's sometimes not this much stuff is in here. I think I'm probably storing extra stuff in here that I don't need to. But I've basically got hides in here, at least one hide and a water dish. And that way I know that all of these things are already clean. They're all ready to go. And if I have to real quick put a snake in here for any reason, then I know that I can do that because I've put a label on it to remind myself that this particular tote is clean and it's ready for use. And what I do if I'm using it then is I take the sign out and I turn it over and it's got my information on it. And this is mainly if I have to evacuate or I'm going to the vet or we're traveling or I'm picking one up. So the ready for use is on one side and the other side has my name and my contact information on it. And then if I'm going to the vet, I'll usually stick the cage card off of the cage from whatever snake I'm taking to the vet. I'll just pull it right off their cage and I'll stick it in here So now I know who's in here, and the vet has all of the snake's information, like their hatch date, the date they arrived with me, and where I got the snake from. Or if somehow the snake gets separated from me, that information is in this. And I also keep one of my cards in here as well. But if the sign is displayed as ready for use, I know that this tub is clean other than the dust that accumulates on the outside. Everything inside it is clean, and it is literally ready for a snake to put into, and we're good to go. Which means after it's used, I have to clean everything out, and I have to set it up again, and then I position the sign that says ready for use. Okay, I'm gonna share this one for you too, for these types of cages with the swing down doors. I may not necessarily be able to leave swing down or swing out doors open to remind me a snake is not in the enclosure the way I can on some of the other enclosures. So if it's a sliding door, obviously the door is open, and hopefully you remember that you opened it and the snake's not in the enclosure. But you know what I've done before is opened the door to change the water or clean something and forgotten to close it, and then I look and there's an open door, and then I'm like, oh, there's an open door. Now I have to look and see, is the snake in the enclosure or are they out free roaming unintentionally? So be careful about that. But sometimes it's not convenient to leave these front opening doors open because they get in the way. On the bottom cages, the dogs and cats tend to get inside the snake enclosures when I do that, and I don't like it. And sometimes my husband, as he's walking by, bumps into the doors and hits himself, or potentially could damage the door, especially the swing out ones, not so much with the ones that swing down. But so what you might want to do, let's say this snake was out of the enclosure. I would want to close the door so that no one gets hurt on it, so that the cats or dogs don't get into the enclosure. And I just put a tag right inside the cage card. This one says out free roaming. And so I'll usually cover up the snake's cage card with it. And so that gives me a heads up that the snake that's normally in this enclosure is out free roaming. You don't have to write the free roaming or tent. You could just write out, especially if you just have one snake, or if you think that you're going to know where you put the snake, you can just write out. You can write whatever you want. These are just the things I use to make life easier for me and my intern and my husband and anybody that might be visiting, which isn't very often because this is our home. We actually combine our living space with our reptile facility that is full of 115 snakes, and our dog kennel facility, which has 15 dogs in it. So we live here and work here, and I love it. I realize that wouldn't be for everyone, but I wouldn't do it any other way. But we don't allow just public visitors here. So it's usually just my parents, my husband, or a working intern that has been vetted and had background checks, and I allow inside. But these signs are helpful, not just to remind me if I get absent-minded, but to remind anyone who happens to be here, hey, there's a snake out, they're in a tent, or they're in this room. And I'm going to show you one other sign that might be important if you have visitors. So this is a caution sign, and I might use a caution sign on an enclosure if it's in quarantine, if it's a sick snake, if it's being treated for something, or if it's here for behavior modification for an issue that could hurt other animals or a person. And so this also has an additional sign that says Bennu bites. Every animal has the potential to bite, but this one came here specifically for an issue with biting. Now, Bennu's never actually bitten anyone here except for me, and the first year or two that he was here, I was really trying to see what triggered the issue that I was told he had about biting. He had been in another home for 4 years and was given back to his breeder for cage aggression and biting people. And I never had any issues with that, probably for the first year he was here. I think into the second year, I started to stretch him more and try to suss out what possible triggers might be. And I was able to determine that. He's been on a behavior modification plan. He's bitten me twice, and that was during that assessment period when I was actually trying to figure out what was triggering the bite. He has not bitten me since. He's been excelling at target training, doing really well, being managed with target training. And I have a very good relationship with him. We had a successful visit to the vet. I handle him. He's been in videos. It's not a problem with me, but I don't trust 100% that if somebody were to interact with him that he didn't know, or that didn't know how to manage him, that a bite couldn't be triggered. And so that's why I keep that signage on his particular enclosure. Everyone, thank you so much for watching and spending some time with me again this week. If you have any questions, suggestions, comments, maybe ideas that I didn't think about, or ways that you manage your snakes when you have them out of the enclosure for whatever reason, I'd like to hear about it in the comments. Until next time, everybody, please remember to always be kind and love your animals.